Hi, everybody. It's Chris Coulter here, and I'm with my intrepid co-hosts, David Grayson and Mark Lee, for this All-In Sustainable Business podcast episode. We have a very special guest that we'll introduce in a second. But first, David, Mark, how's it going? How are you?
It's all good with me. Thanks, Chris.
Excellent. And Mark, how are things in California? It's an early
Going
morning.
well here, Chris. Yeah, delighted to be here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Well, we do have a very exciting guest, and we're thrilled that he's here with us. But Jesper Brodin, välkomna in Swedish, which I think I nailed it on welcome. Yeah, nailed it. But Jesper, who has just stepped down as CEO of Inca Group IKEA, and we've caught him at a time where he's from that very exciting, significant role we'll get into a whole suite of other activities focused on business and society. And Jesper, we're thrilled to have you here and welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity. Likewise, super exciting to have the opportunity.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about all the work you're doing now. There's the Earthshot Prize, there's the work on the UN Global Compact you continue with, the B Team work that you've been doing for many years, your work with the World Economic Forum, and the IKEA Foundation on an ongoing basis. We'll get to the future soon, or the present at least, and then the future. But maybe let's take us back a little bit. So you were at IKEA for 30 years. You were chief executive for a decade, plus or minus? Something.
Yeah, yes, I think 9 years, or short of 9 years.
Okay.
I was with the company 30 years. Can you imagine? I was actually on 1st of August last year. I got an email from myself congratulating me to 30 years with the company. Here you go. If you want a world record in cost consciousness, offering me 3 days extra vacation after 30 years. I thought it was hilarious. That's not the reason why I left, though. But
did you take the 3 days? That's the important.
I actually think I forgot.
And what was your first job at IKEA? 30 years ago, as a very young man. What was?
So basically, I applied to a job through an ad. Encouraged by my then girlfriend, now wife, since many years back. Mm-hmm. And the job was to run a newly set up purchasing office in Karachi, Pakistan. So these were the days when basically IKEA was moving from sourcing in Europe predominantly to be curious about the world, in particular Asia. So as a young leader, I actually had the opportunity to move out there. And I sometimes tell the story, it's quite funny, because after a year or so, things were really moving well, and what an adventure it was. My manager from Singapore came on a visit, and I asked him, why me? 25 years old, no IKEA experience, no experience of Pakistan or that part. And he told me I was the only one who applied to the job. So that, I think and I met somebody this week, I have to just say that, Ajay Banga. We were on the same panel, and he said something wonderful. He said, life is 50% about luck, and the rest of the 50% if you grasp the luck when it comes to you. So I think that was actually another way of telling the same story.
It's very good. Like the Woody Allen, 80% of life is showing up or, trying. So yeah,
there you go.
That's great. Well, I'll ask, David and Mark want to jump in too, but just we always ask this question, when did you get switched on around sustainability? I mean, did it transpire when you became chief executive? Was it before? I mean, the IKEA system is built around it, but how did that journey arise for you?
Well, I think there were a couple of moments, but one of the most impactful moments was in Pakistan. So the business case was just incredible. We were, mind you, when I stepped into that office, we had about point-something percent of IKEA's business in textile purchased from Pakistan. Incredible industries, very well invested, very competent leaders, management teams, and so forth. 2 years down the road, we had something like 30% plus of IKEA's textiles when it comes to bed linen, curtains, and whatnot. Wow. So it was like a Klondike, if you like. At the same time, there were differences when it comes to environmental aspects and to social aspects and people aspects compared to, for instance, working in Sweden. I wouldn't say it was that dramatic as people like to think, but things were not on to the level that we were used to. And that was a huge issue in the company. I observed how I think the leaders of IKEA had big discussions around this. Should we apply our values and legislations from where we come to people in other countries, and all sorts of discussions. And I had the opportunity to, and I must say it was a tough dilemma, because I didn't feel entirely good about the business success for that reason. Now, long story short, what we did was we basically met with the founders of these industries, and together we developed the aspects that later became IKEA's Code of Conduct. This was done in a very methodic way on a global scale, but in Pakistan, we actually were part of trailblazing some of those aspects. And interesting enough, that dilemmas are amazing. We should learn to love dilemmas and be patient. But down the road, we only found benefits. I met one of the Pakistani suppliers just a few months ago, second or third generation, I think, owner. We remembered how, treating people well, improved quality, retention rates, whatnot, and being smart around environment was actually saving cost on wasteful behaviors and whatnot. And he told me also how they recently had gone all in on renewable energy, so they were independent. Wow. And cost smart in Pakistan, in a big textile industry, mind you. And he also shared that they were on the brink of getting water independency, which I think is quite fantastic in that industry. So I guess from the beginning, I saw issues, and I was part in an IKEA community that experienced dilemmas that actually took us to benefit not only in our hearts and sleeping better at night, but also economically from sustainability.
Excellent. David, go ahead.
So how far is there this very distinctive kind of Scandinavian approach to this more kind of stakeholder view of the firm, responsible capitalism, whatever you want to call it, that has been particularly influential in terms of the way your thinking has evolved, Jesper?
Well, amazing people, the Scandinavians. I think.
That's what all the Scandinavians tell us.
Yeah, we like to think so. We still apologize for things that happened, but it was so many 100 years ago, so let's forget and move on. I think, of course, there are different corporate cultures in the world, and I wouldn't potentially like to simplify it as a Scandinavian thing. There might be something there, yeah. But I think if I look at the IKEA culture, since long before I joined the company, I think the founder and the first generation of leaders developed conscious about, from the company being like a small startup and garage band, to becoming a multinational activity. So I think as the company grew, I think also the conscious grew. But the company was always rooted in a set number of values like cost consciousness. I think the part of Sweden where IKEA was born, wastefulness is a sin, basically. Mm-hmm. Some even say a mortal sin, but I don't know. But the whole idea about being thrifty with resources sits in the DNA of the company. Mm-hmm. And as such, I think it's the link where we sometimes, unfortunately, in the confusion of the world, have created a rift between sustainability and profitability, for instance. Mm-hmm. From an IKEA perspective, obviously, these things are incredibly well linked. And there are areas and issues that might have economic challenges or might have not yet been solved. But most things you do out of thriftiness is good for your pocket and is good for the planet.
And Jesper, you started with us in Pakistan, and I think it was incredibly encouraging and quite rare, obviously, to hear that at that point, 30 years ago, not only were you encouraged to bring sustainability issues kind of into the room, but you had lots of support, that was already a developing function inside the organization. And over the 3 decades, you played a whole bunch of roles on the way to CEO. And I wonder if you could stepping stone us through a couple others and how your understanding of sustainability evolved and how it was evolving in the company around you as you made your way through this multi-decade journey.
Well, there were a couple of moments more. I think Pakistan was the definer. And interesting enough, what we started, the IKEA way of purchasing, or the code of conduct in IKEA, was started back in the late 90s. And as it turned out, I was the person to, so to say, round it up and finish the implementation. It took us 10 years. And I think we had like a bulk of this work were put in place, but we had a couple of few items left on the list back in 2008 when I accepted to take a regional role of China, of IKEA's activities there. And in particular with the focus on the supply chain side. And what we hadn't cracked then was working hours. In the dilemma in China with actually one of the most strict regulations in the world, with I think 47 or 49 hours, but a very translusive way of implementing it in places. So I would say in part of the supply chain in China, the history had people working far too much. So for us, that was one of the dilemmas. And let me tell you the interesting story, because what helped us gain courage, except from the support I received from the leaders and the CEO at IKEA at that time, was a meeting regarding quality with about 120 suppliers in south of China. For some reason, art by accident, the facilitation of the discussion ended up in two strong opinions. One opinion in the room was IKEA needs to make up its mind. Is it low cost, low price, or is it quality? You can't have both. The other side of the room said the opposite. If we go all in on quality, we're going to lower our costs tremendously. And that was one of the biggest aha moments in my business career, because it was all about mindset and perception. And typically, to be honest, there were one group, as it turned out, was a little bit younger, more educated, more visionary. And the other side was, I think, let's say, part of a past behavior that wasn't good for business in many other ways as well. So we made our choices, and we made the choice to go with the modern part of the industrialist as we saw it. And, you know, the way they took on automation, and again, we nailed the working hour piece. It took a shorter time than we thought. There was one or two breaches, one or two sad moments, but it wasn't as dramatic as we had thought. And in the end of the day, these industries, they are not only producing for IKEA today, they have opened industries in Europe and in US and in other places. They are industrial leaders in progress. So again, it shows that if you resist the myth, and if you go with a little bit longer perspective, what you think is the right thing, you might actually be successful. So that's definitely one of the moments as well that was incredibly important for me. And actually one of the moments where I actually felt this was one of those moments when you get
you're aware of it in the moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes you 10 years to realize what happened, but that one was in the moment.
Can I build on that, Jesper? Because I think there's the quality, low cost tension, and there was also the sustainability piece of that equation that was added, I think, more explicitly in your time, at least in the last decade or so. And you said, I love dilemmas. We should embrace dilemmas. Like, is there something in those multiple, like, why are those dilemmas so interesting, and how do you square sustainability and the low cost quality equation?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's a general thing with dilemmas, but I think problems have the nature, as I like to see, that you will be able with good people to establish a couple of optional paths, and you choose one and you go. Dilemmas is basically wherever you go, there is pain. You're basically stuck between bad things. But very often it's in our minds and it's not the reality. So if you broaden the gaze and if you give yourself a little bit time, wonderful things can present themselves. And I think these were the moments for IKEA where, honestly, our own mythical belief was that we would lose out on the cost side. Now, there are areas where we have approached sustainability where also, of course, it wasn't easy. I remember back in the 2007s or something, implementing recycled plastics at IKEA. We had to take a step back on some of those projects as oil prices, virgin plastic prices dropped in the financial crisis and so on. So it's not all rosy and a simple pathway. Yeah. But if you zoom out and if you look at the bigger picture, we are today very often stuck in mythical beliefs. For instance, that quality would be expensive when every industrial knows it's the opposite. Bad quality is very expensive. Yeah. When you know that treating people right is an incredible economic asset, not the opposite. So I think these things, these mythical things, I think are easier to confront. Sometimes we have to take risks in investments, in scaling innovation, like IKEA did. Our CEO at that time, Mikael Olsson, pushed for a total phase out of incandescent lighting, and we went for LED. I was in the room when the decision was taken. It was super cool because the business case was terrible. So, yeah. But he was like, I guess, Mikael have to speak to himself, but I guess he understood that two things. IKEA is not going to go bankrupt if we fail on this one. Of course, we don't want to lose a business opportunity. Two, he probably draw the conclusion that LED is going to come, whatever we like. Yeah. And third, which I agree with him in that meeting, is just because the business case doesn't look good right now, it doesn't mean it will not when we start scaling things and putting our volume to it. So, we have been wrong many times, but in this case, we were incredibly right. And if you look at IKEA's total carbon footprint, what happened in just one decision like that, it was just incredible.
And you mentioned there, Jesper, some of the behaviors of past CEOs. When I look at other companies, sometimes it feels like the sustainability programs get too associated with a single executive leader. And yet I perceive, at least, that IKEA has somehow culturally been able to carry, continuous momentum forward through multiple leaders. And what is it about the culture that lets that happen?
It's a very interesting question. I think the opposite side, why would the opposite happen, so to say? But you're right. I think in the case of IKEA, we have 8 core values in IKEA. And caring for people and planet is one of them. It was part of an update. I think it's the only one that we have introduced. It was sort of always there, but it was outspoken some maybe 15, 20 years ago. It's basically, it sits from the foundation structure in the ownership across our strategies and all the way. And that doesn't mean that we still also in IKEA struggle and lose our faith sometimes or fail in certain elements, so to say. But I think it is truly not connected to me. And as I left my assignment now, I think I had the pleasure to be part of proving my predecessors right, which is a wonderful thing. Because a lot of the decisions that we took was based on belief. And I actually had, during my 8 to 9 years, I had the pleasure to see them economically play out and also see how we, as you might have seen, the number that IKEA during these years grow with approximately 24% in revenue and reduced its carbon footprint by 30%, scope 1, 2, and 3. And if you look at how integrated carbon is to the cost of IKEA, you understand that when we actually managed to touch carbon, we actually reduced our cost. So it's been one of the best economic decisions we've taken. But it had to be proven.
Yes, but it's very impressive that you can say sometimes I and my predecessors took decisions where ultimately it was based on beliefs, like the switch from incandescent lighting, for example. But supposing I'm a CEO who's in a PE-backed business and the private equity owners are absolutely on the numbers all the time, and sort of the CEO is saying, this is my belief that this is in the long-term interests of the business.
Good luck.
Good luck. Career limiting.
Join IKEA.
Point, David.
What's your advice in those
yeah, so if we take any of these CEOs and you say, so you should not act on AI, don't act on AI, because that has to be based on faith, right? You don't know if it's going to be 100% right for your company, but so don't act on AI, don't act on anything new. There are companies who are conservative in their ways of progressing. There are companies that are consciously or unconsciously, I think both, on the trajectory of harvesting what they saw, but not necessarily sowing the new. And we can all understand the economics of it. But as a leader, as a CEO, your role is, of course, to make sure the ship is moving on in a good way. But one of the primary tasks is, of course, to stake out the future direction. And the issue with the future is that it's not proven. So we can all, so to say, rely on the past, the mistakes and the successes. And there are a lot of arguments and proof points to the past, and there is no proof point to the future. So you need to build your own belief, of course, not only on your ethical belief, but you have to have your economical belief, and you need to word that, and you need to be convincing. And I do think it's, to a certain extent, easier to be in a foundation-based context and environment. But also, every leader have to take some risk and have to believe in what's good for the company. And I believe if you're not on board of the climate smart economy transformation as a CEO today, you're taking an enormous risk with your company.
The last number of years, there's been a proliferation of focus on the business case. And I think it's part of the backlash to ESG and the polarization and all this sort of stuff that's relatively novel in the sustainability journey. It's always been there, but it's peaked. And in that, seems to have been a lack of focus or even a shying away from this idea of morality or ethics or even integrity.
Yeah.
And do you think we'll find that again collectively? Will business leaders have expectations upon them to be not just focused on the transactional, but are we done with morality, or should we
Yes.
come back to it?
That is so old school. No,
Yeah,
listen. I think to be a little bit blunt, I think I don't want to contribute to the polarization, but presidents come and go. Unfortunately, climate change has not been resolved yet. It's not going anywhere. There is, and we could speak to that. There is much, much more happening, and I've never been so optimistic about how we are resolving climate change as now, because 7, 8, 9 years I couldn't point at any proof point of the transformation, but at the moment it's absolutely not only IKEA. It's basically a revolutionary transformation that is happening, and I have the facts to prove that in not every industry, but in a majority of them. So I think it is disappointing that if you speak to awareness, if I start there, in the World Economic Forum's latest risk analysis, in the 10-year perspective, all these CEOs out there have then rated risks, and I think there are 10 of them posted. And the top 4 are environmental. So when people tell us there is no awareness, that seems to be wrong. When you look at commitment, if you look at Global Compact, which is the largest corporate sustainability movement in the world with 23,000 members, I think, their latest report shared a number of 97% of CEOs claim that they are committed to sustainability. This is anonymous and all. So I thought the number was higher than I would ever dream and hope for, but that says something. 88% in the same group says the business case is better today than 5 years ago. I'm not at all surprised, because 5 years ago we had hardly started. Only 50% are comfortable to speak to it, and that's one of our problems today. The silence and the fear. However, there are industries who have turned. I think not only turn to silence, but to turn maybe even 180 degrees away from it. We've seen that in different industries, in the finance industries, in other industries. And I think it could be due to political pressure in certain constituencies, for sure. But it's also maybe for lack of actually having a business case. So if you speak to parts of agriculture, if you speak to parts of aviation, there are industries in the world who doesn't have something to implement yet. So while others, and luckily most of us have, we have to listen carefully to the different narratives. And I think the drift between politicians of the world and companies here has been less beneficiary for the movement. I would say even to a certain extent, generalizing and moving too fast and too extreme for most corporates, and then to, in the next situation, move back to step one. I think the dialogue and the step-by-step movement will be incredibly important. As we speak, there is a conference in Colombia around shifting subsidies, which I think is the right thing. Subsidies We all understand the importance of it. There can be different drivers for it. But as you stand in what might be the biggest economic revolution in 100 years or more, these decisions needs to be questioned, and you need to look at how you actually enable the transformation and that we pick up speed, both for the sake of humanity and our existence, but also for the sake of benefiting economically. The ones who do will be the economic leaders of the future.
And Jesper, I'd love to hear more about the climate optimism in some of the conversations that just the three of us, David and Chris and I have had, but also with others. As we look at 2030, many organizations, private sector and public, are going to miss their climate goals. You were talking a moment ago about how IKEA has decoupled growth and carbon intensity, but most haven't. And we're in a moment where many, not for lack of effort, are not going to attain the ambitions that they hit. So we're kind of anticipating this moment where the private sector is going to need to explain what happened and kind of reset. And so hearing that you're optimistic about the pace at which solutions are emerging and scaling is helpful. And it would be great to hear more. But also, if you agree that we're going to miss targets in 2030, how do we get through that, and improve or maintain the momentum necessary?
Yeah, there are a couple of lessons we can learn from what happened the last years. And I think if we put them to the questions that you put on the future, we should be a bit more balanced in the way we approach it. To start with, I think you probably have better data than I have. There will be companies who will hit the target. I think probably IKEA will be one of them. There will be companies who will be close. There will be companies who will totally fail. I think the two basically driving factors for it. It could be a lack of belief and leadership within that company, or it can be simply that you're in an industry that is super hard to abate or hard to progress with. If I look at the IKEA total scope 1, 2, and 3 universe, there are elements in that value chain where we will over deliver, and there will be areas where we simply don't have a solution yet. It's going to be beyond 2030. But it's a bit like the 1.5 degree discussion. I've been in some meetings, probably you as well. People say we're going to overshoot 1.5, so let's not bother. While the right conclusion is probably every 0.1 degree that we can avoid, or every year or 5 years that we can actually pick up speed is, of course, going to be to our advantage. So I think also there needs to be an understanding and a dialogue with different industries, what can be done. And if there is not an innovation to be scaled, the work has to start there. I think also in this infectious topic about offsets, for instance, where the world has been divided, I find it not so difficult to understand what is the right thing to do. If your strategy is offsetting something bad and continue doing the bad, of course, that should not be accepted. But if you don't yet have the solution to scale, of course, an offset will help all of us collectively. So I think a little bit more rounded way of approaching it. But at the same time, build the energy, which we couldn't do 10 years ago, on the successes, because they are out there. Again, the World Economic Forum's Climate Alliance, this, I think, is one of the key reasons why I am optimistic. When I decided back in 2018 for us in IKEA to be part of that alliance, it was due to the reason that there was no Paris Agreement commitment, and there was no plan. There was an intention, but that was basically it. Now, the forum tricked me. So they called me and said, if we change that, would you like to be a co-chair? And it's like, okay. And I never regretted that. That was an incredibly interesting learning. I think both on leadership, but also on engineering and everything in between. Now, a few years down the road, this alliance, 133 companies, I believe still today it is. If you look at the total scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon footprint, would that be a country? It would be the third biggest country in the world. That's how big it is. And that means, at least in my world, that means if we want to crack this, we couldn't do it without this group, But on the other hand, if this group can show progress, there must be hope and optimism. And the last 3 years, this group collectively have shown a -12 in absolute carbon, scope 1, 2, and 3.
Awesome.
And then you say it's not enough, correct? But we only started. We wish we could have started 25 years ago, but we didn't. But the momentum the last years has to be seen as something impressive. Again, it's not enough. Again, there are a lot of questions, backlashes, and so on. But we who speak to this need to equip ourselves with more facts around the true transformations. And mind you that everyone who has gone through some of the pain and some of the risk of converting to renewable energy, we smile every day of the week today, both for financial reasons, for reasons of independence, and for whatever reason. This is the new economy.
And we just shift a little bit then, Jesper, to the Earthshot Prize, which you've got the chairmanship of, working closely with our Prince of Wales, Prince William. What do you see most exciting about the kind of examples that are coming from the Earthshot Prize already? And I noticed in an interview you did with the Times a few days ago, you were talking about also encouraging big businesses to engage with the Earthshot Prize as well in future. But what are some of the exciting things? Because you must have had so many different things that you could be asked to do. You chose to do this as one of your next act portfolio. What really attracted you to the Earthshot Prize?
Very good. Well, I think two things in particular. I also had the pleasure to meet the Prince, and I've also seen him and met him on a previous occasion, and his competence, his commitment, his passion for it is true and real. And that is, of course, incredibly important, that this is not just a symbolic act on the side. I think we share the same passion for this topic, definitely. Secondly, I think it's a super cool project. It has a beauty in its simplicity, with focusing on five areas. It's basically air, oceans, nature, climate, and waste. And it's bringing the best activities out there together. If you look at last year, the range of winners was the city of Bogota to the Open Oceans Treaty, or the Deep Sea Treaty, to NGOs, to companies. So when you look at that, I think the energy that you get from it is just incredible. What we have spoken about as one of the things we want to do even better in the Earthshot Prize is impact. So many of these winners have already an incredible impact. Some of them need to be scaled and invested in and driven, which we will do and continue to do well. But to the same narrative as we spoke to just a few minutes ago, if we want to have real change, we need to have the real scalers, the real industries, and not symbolic changes. And therefore, we are very excited to the coming 5 years, as this is a 10-year program, to look at big industries and to look at leaders and technologies and courage, but also financial success in the space of these five.
It's very exciting. I know you've been engaged on this idea of innovation and the Action Speaks platform that IKEA had going. And then I think just understanding the supply chain at IKEA and what's possible with small suppliers that can scale. I think you can see from an idea to something big. But I want to shift back to the stat you referenced on the UN Global Compact survey of CEOs across the network, and everything was positive except this idea of speaking about it, and the green hushing that's happening at scale across. I mean, is this again what's the reason why CEOs should be speaking? And people can speak about this in different ways, you get different tones and different language, but the fact of the dramatic level of silence is very unique in this 39-year journey on sustainable development so far. It's a difficult moment.
Well, I think, and let me express my personal view on that. Some of the things we talk about now is about facts, but this is my personal view. I understand CEOs that choose to be silent today. And mind you, there are two drivers of that. One is obviously that in some countries where you operate, you're almost being threatened to be dragged to court for showing your position in this area. So that is a true dilemma. Suddenly, in your leadership, you know, with your responsibility for employees, for shareholders, for the future of the company, you're being threatened, which is not okay. On the other hand, you have, to a certain extent, I think, with all the love to the sustainability community and all the NGOs out there, the overexcited linear perspective on as soon as a company raises their voice, basically being claimed for greenwashing without even a fair scrutiny or a dialogue. Yeah. And I've seen that in IKEA too. I've seen, and we made one or two mistakes in our communication, maybe in some of our assessment, but the intentions were great and the results were good. So I think when you have these two forces, you think maybe I stay out of it. However, here's my view. I don't think it's okay. I think if it's important to you as a leader, and if it's important to your employees and to what you represent, but also to yourself, to look yourself in the mirror, I can acknowledge it's difficult, but that doesn't mean you have an okay to stay out of the dialogue of something important. Then I think we need to find other ways, collectively, or find both our courage and our narrative to actually speak to what's important. There is a massive risk being taken by not only companies who speak 180 degrees different from what they did 5 years ago, but also silence will be remembered. And if we zoom out and look 3, 5, 7 years down the road, this is not going away. People's view on leaders who have the power to actually influence this will hold all of us accountable, I think. So again, I think it's not easy, but I think we need to muster our courage and do a better job here.
Yeah. Jesper, in the course of that really interesting answer, you mentioned briefly investors, and us struck we haven't really talked about them. And I know IKEA, with the foundation structure, is not as exposed to the markets as many others, but would still be really curious for your view on the role of the investment community on the sustainability agenda, what you see them doing effectively, how companies can engage them better to win support, you know, as a critical stakeholder to progress. Are they on board? How do we get them on board? What's happening in that dialogue?
Yeah, I think here we have the whole range of approaches, from basically a very honest, not caring at all, to financial institutes who are led by ethical standards and borderlines of where they go, and not only what they avoid, but what they encourage. And then we have a lot of, I think, financial institutions a little bit caught in the middle. The thing that CEOs and this part of the world has been asking for, I think, the last years, from fellow politicians around the world, is basically two things. It's alignment cross-border and consistency over time. None of that has been delivered the last 10 years. It's been probably the most challenging environment for a lot of these leaders to actually do the right things. And again, CEOs and companies, whether it's in hardware or construction or agriculture or finance, are builders. You don't operate most of your agendas on 6 or 12 months, or even the terms like politicians are elected on. You have to have a longer perspective of what you do. So therefore, the uncertainty has been mind-blowing. And I also think the shifts from left to right in the space, where all the extremes have actually, I think in both cases, been very challenging for the business community. Not a lot of people want to speak up to this and complain. We complain secretly, but obviously it's there that we haven't been able to together, CEOs and political leadership, find a reasonable Scandinavian lagom pathway to something that is possible. And therefore, of course, some people have decided to take a step back, and some people have decided to be more silent. That is the truth. But again, the problem remains to be solved, and it's going to hit us both our leadership, but also financially. It's coming our way, obviously.
So if we take that analysis, which I very much agree with, and apply that then to some of the collaborations, the coalitions that you're active in and have been involved with for some time, what are one or two things which, if only they could be done better, could make a significant difference in terms of the effectiveness of collaborative action by groups of coalitions of the willing, if you like, in terms of groups of companies who have that longer term perspective, who understand the challenges that are being faced in terms of climate, biodiversity loss, etc., etc. What are the things which would make, whether it's We Mean Business or UN Global Compact or B Team, WBCSD, World Forum, etc., what would make them even more effective?
Wow. I think it's, I almost want to ask you the same question with all your knowledge and platforms. But I do think continue alignment across these organizations will be important because very often we are driving the same type of topics and agendas. I think learning from the last decade will be incredibly important as well. There might be a situation where we see political shifts in a few years from now. And I think one of the most important thing is not to contribute to further polarization in the other direction, but basically, if we could find a way together to take out some of the political anxiety of the topic, because it's actually much more, it's existentialistic, the topic, and it's about engineering and investments, but it's not a political issue at all. And where there are transformations, where there are fears of winners and losers or fears of losers, you always have pushbacks. And I think it was not well managed to actually allow that type of pushback to happen, which was probably also provoked with a mismatch between the expectations and what was actually possible.
Dilemma you've referenced, Jesper, and I think what you said there is interesting too. I don't think we don't spend enough time reviewing the last 5 or 10 or 20 years sometimes. We kind of just keep going without learning the lessons and really absorbing them. So I think those the coalitions, and just to be, for everyone listening, there's the Earthshot Prize chair. You're involved at the senior levels of the UN Global Compact. The WEF role you're playing as co-chair on the Climate Alliance is there. You're also a senior leader on the B Team, and you have a role in the IKEA Foundation. So you're quite active with a very diverse portfolio, which is fantastic, and we're grateful for all that. But maybe to round out the conversation, in some work that Mark and ERM and GlobeScan and Volans did last year on a assessment of the sustainability agenda, sustainability at crossroads, we found that the sustainability community or the ecosystem of change has focused that we need more demand side signals. We need more mechanisms to pull markets forward. So what about the consumer in all this? I mean, what has your learning been on where consumers are? How do we stoke demand rather than pushing things? What's your lessons?
Well, thank you, Chris. I think you have helped us immensely in IKEA, also through GlobeScan, with some of those most important insights, I would say. When we started this journey, we were told by experts to focus upstream, but not downstream. There was some sort of idea that downstream is not gonna work. You won't be able to influence. And it was also true. When we started our first attempts to engage customers into sustainability, I think we won people's heart, but it didn't really have a lot of impact, to be honest. So one of these moments was when we got the analysis a few years ago, where close to 70% of IKEA's customers in any country or market was actually deeply concerned about climate change. We were motivated even more to listen. We think it's a good idea to listen to your customers. And then when we asked them about if they were prepared to pay, and these are a few years ago, but back then about 6% of the IKEA customers said they were prepared to pay extra for sustainability. And I draw the conclusion, and I think a lot of people with me, that means that people, after all, don't care. Until I met this lady on a home visit, I think it was in Belgrade, single parent, 2 kids, 2 jobs. And she looked me in the eye and she said, "Do you really think I can afford it?" And there you go. And like, the interesting thing with the economics of this is, if sustainability would come at a premium, only the wealthy people of the planet will be able to afford it, and we will thereby change nothing at all. So I think any business that attempts to put sustainability on top of will fail. It's no real transformation. So what we took on in IKEA is to say, okay, we have to actually fundamentally change the business model to make it affordable. And a lot of people have asked me and still ask me, how is it possible to be part of consumption and be sustainable? It's exactly the only way you can be sustainable, is to integrate and make sure that you build it in through renewable energy, electrical mobility, circularity materials, and all of that. That's how you do it. So we started to present offers to our customers for energy, for water, and for waste, where we also priced it in a way so that the solutions were same or more affordable than the old ones. And we also were clear on what type of energy savings the customers could have on buying this and that product. And the combination of doing what's right and giving people an opportunity to save money has been dynamite. So at least for the 2 years when we drove this agenda, the fastest growing business in IKEA was sustainable life at home products. And I think it's still doing fantastically commercially. So I think that's the secret. You have to transform fundamentally, and you have to give an economic proposition to your customers. Then it's going to come.
Excellent. So listening to customers, a very good business idea. Any quick last comments, Mark or David, before we round out?
Feels like we're in the territory of thanks. Yeah, Jesper, it's been such an enjoyable conversation. Really appreciative of all the insights and excited to see what you will do with the broad portfolio you're still holding as you move forward here. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jesper. And thank you for all your leadership over the years. And you've inspired many business leaders and non-business leaders, and we really value it. And important to say, you are also an accomplished musician, and people don't know this.
Terrible.
No, it's not terrible. It's great. So Lord Beaverbrook is your alter ego, and it's on Spotify. So if anyone wants to hear some great,
you need to have some meditation and some fun in this life. Maybe, Chris, if I may say that also to thank you. I think one of the most important thing we can do, all of us together, is to stay with the facts and stay with not only early indications of change, but actually the ones that are having massive transformative success right now. And we actually don't have to argue for this more. And if we need to, it's probably the wrong people we speak to anyways. I think we need to discuss what are the things that we can scale and how do we make it more economically viable. If we hit that sweet spot, I'm sure that even if we surpass the 1.5, we will be faster on actually bringing things back to where it should be and doing a better job collectively. So looking forward to your insights and numbers and understanding of how the world actually operates, Chris, about the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jesper. And thanks everyone for listening. We appreciate it. And please share this recording with others. It's a valuable insights that Jesper has shared with us. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.